Dark Arts, episode number 8. Today we're going to be talking about schemata. Schemata, the singular is schema. Schema is a structured framework. It's how your brain's wired to process information from your senses. Another term for that is schemas, just a plural of schema. You think of electronics, we have schematics, which are blueprints for the structure of an electronic circuit. And any type of schematic, it doesn't have to be electronics, could be for anything. It's the structure of how the thing's made, or how it works, not really how it's made, how it works. And so we have this model, this mental model, and these are developed or formed by our experiences. You have experiences, and those experiences lead to, you learning concepts, new concepts for you. And these experiences and concepts form your mental framework, which is your schemata. And your mental framework, your schemata, forms your thoughts, emotions, behavior, and your physical, your physiology, how you, feel about, or physically feel about things as well. And your thoughts and your behaviors and your emotions, that can control what you experience. And you could also, consciously want to learn new concepts. So you can physically, or you can have control over your schemata by, you control what your experiences are. Not totally. There's some things happen that are beyond your control, but you can actually, if you want to go for, learn how to ride a motorbike, you get your license and ride a motorbike. That's something you can do, right? So you can control your experiences. Somewhat. Doesn't mean you're not going to get hit by a transport truck and wiped out, but there's limits to obviously what we control. And your concepts, you can learn new things. We can perceive many abstract concepts, that are beyond our perception. You could think of luck or growth. Well, I guess you could watch something grow, but the growth is an abstract concept. Same with like right, or shock, or dishonesty, or annoyance, or a goal. So a schema is a generalization of our past experiences, how we perceive and can understand the world at that moment from our past experiences and concepts that we've learned. Synonyms, other words for schemata are mental modes, concepts, mental representations, knowledge structures. So a schema is a mental structure we use to simplify the fire hose of information and knowledge that is around us. It dictates what information we as individuals are currently able to recognize and understand based on our own personal experiences, experienced by us individually, and every single person on this planet has a different, unique schemata. It's pretty spooky if it's a real thing, but with the soft sciences, I wouldn't hold my breath. If you look into schemata, you'll see a lot of projection by the people in the soft sciences, which is pretty annoying. They'll project their stereotypes and assume that everybody has those same stereotypes, which is obviously wrong. And it's the opposite to the concept of schematas or schemata. It's the whole point of schematas are that your experiences and concepts that you learn control, or allow you to think, about different things. It broadens your capacity of understanding. And every person has a unique schemata because every person has unique experiences. And for these people to say that, well, everybody of, whatever, it just gets so, they're racially divisive, the way they say things. But, everybody of a certain, whatever random category you want to pile people into based on skin color or whatever, don't have the same experiences. Every individual has a unique experience, right? Not everybody of the same, everybody who's white don't all have the same beliefs or concepts or stereotypes. Everybody who's black or anybody who's any shade or whatever category you want to put people into, they are all unique individuals. Twins. Everybody has a unique experience. and for people to imply that you have biases that are shared by everybody of your skin color is just a stereotypical, garbage. And schemata are not permanent, right? Our minds are not static. We have the capacity to learn. We have the capacity to learn. That means we have the capacity to learn new concepts. New concepts, control what our schemata. So new concepts broaden our schemata. We can now understand more things, right? So we have neuroplasticity. We can learn. Since we all have unique schemata and we all have the capacity to learn, for someone to claim that people of whatever demographic all share the same biases is, on the face of it, logically fallacious. It's just garbage. And yet this is the stuff you hear from people in academia, from universities. It's garbage. This is how horrible our education system are today. Can you imagine paying money to go and have somebody on the face of it being that stupid trying to teach you some garbage like that? It's asinine. You should be able to figure this out yourself when you hear logically incongruent things coming out of the social sciences. Would they say, well, every person is unique and every person, could develop their own schemata, yet all white people think the same. All black people think the same. All the, it's what? How could everybody have unique, experiences and yet everybody thinks the same from, it's just, you think the same about, whatever. I don't want to go down that road but that's, you're going to hear it, and it's just so exhausting. These morons who should know better, don't. And they sound like every other cult member when they try to make excuses or try to make these concepts fit their ideology, which is growing further and further, to these woke, haters, these woke bigots who want to put everybody in, stereotypical groups. They're extreme racists. And yet they're calling everyone else racists because they're projecting their own racism onto everyone else. It's funny, I guess, but they're all closed-minded bigots, right? They have their own assumptions, and they believe their assumptions are fact. There's probably manipulation going on in academia too by domestic and foreign interests who want to see Western culture collapse. You hear people at universities talking about this all the time, death to the West and, pro-globalist crap, if, and you think, well, who would want globalism? Well, if you are maybe we shouldn't talk about this because it's beyond the scope of this, but we'll talk about globalism and nationalism in another video. The people in the soft sciences who, if you listen to them, they're in an echo chamber of like-minded, closed-minded, woke bigots, and they all reinforce they're an echo chamber, so they reinforce their illogical assumptions, and they argue that dissent, voices of dissent, must not be tolerated, right? Let's ban people, right? Well, if that's what they're saying, that goes against everything that's science. Science is about the voices of dissent. This is not some religious inquisition where everyone has to, repeat the dogma of some ideological morons. But enough about the ideological soft science, soft-headed people. But it's hard not to talk to them when we're talk about them. It's hard not to talk about them when we're talking about this stuff. So, it's their field. So there's a few ways that your brain will perceive information based on this schemata model. One is, understanding. Somebody gives you a concept that you understand. Yeah, you'll understand it. Poof, there's one. Another one is to give you a concept that you know a little bit about, and you think you understand it, and you fill in the gaps with assumptions and guesses, and you don't really get it. So That's another way of perceiving. Third way is somebody gives you an idea that you don't know anything about, but it's not so alien that you're not willing to, sort of put it in your head and like, okay, that's, maybe I'll try to figure out what this is. What is that, right? So you're accommodating this information. You're making room for it, but you still don't know anything about it. And you should know that you don't know anything about it. And then there's another extreme form of information that's just totally alien, that you don't know, like you don't understand the concepts at all. And your brain will try to grasp it, and it's like, it's not important. I'll just dismiss it because I don't know what that even means. Yeah, so if somebody gives you a concept or an idea, that you don't know anything about, then you're just going to be like, glaze over, right? I got no idea what they're talking about. It's not sticking in my head. My brain's shutting down, and I'm not going to, just there it goes, right? So those are the 3 or 4, 5 different concepts: understanding, partial understanding, making room for understanding, and not understanding. So I guess it'd be like 4. But when you're exposed to information that you're not grasping, we have the capacity to learn. We can look into things. We can be curious. Just because you're exposed to something, doesn't mean that you won't remember it. If somebody talks about some type of, Viking battleship or something like that, and I don't know anything about Viking battleships, so you're just going to not remember what the name of the boat was, or the type of the boat, or whatever, But then if you're thinking about it, if you're paying attention, you can be like, I don't know, like that was a new term for me. I'm going to read about that. I'm going to look into that. So now you're expanding your experience and your concepts, and you're learning about you could read and you can understand, and you can now know more about those Viking boats. So then when you recall and talk to somebody else later, and you talk about these Viking boats, you can say it was this type of boat or it was that type of boat, right? So now you understand the concepts. Whereas if you don't pay attention and you don't look at it, you will not remember for sure. You're not going to remember the name. It's, what was that? I don't know, some kind of a Viking boat. I don't know. And then maybe in the future it'd be even worse than that. But so it's totally dependent on your attention, and you choosing to learn new concepts or choosing to ignore these concepts. Now, this is not a matter of being open-minded or closed-minded. This is a matter of, do I need this information? Because there are so many rabbit holes you could go down. You could spend your entire life learning about metals, right? And you still wouldn't know all there is to know. So where do you draw the line, right? You have to be reasonable. You can't go down every rabbit hole. Do you really need to know the names of all the different types of Viking ships? Probably not. So is that a worthwhile thing? Probably not. Right? So, but we have the capacity if you want to, and that's an important thing to grasp. But it's also an important thing to grasp that we aren't experts on everything, and we're not going to remember things that are alien to us, and we're not going to really comprehend things that are beyond our experience and our our concepts, our current understandings of things. You think about, how could a blind person comprehend the color red? Well, yeah, it's going to be pretty hard, right? But we're blind to all colors of the spectrum outside of the visible, which is a very small percentage of the entire spectrum. And yet we understand the concepts of microwaves. We understand the concepts of radio waves. We understand the concept of all the other, X-rays. Did I say X-rays? No. But we understand the concept of all the different types of, light, gamma rays, right? Well, as well as a blind person, a blind person and us, equally understand the concept of radio waves. Well, if they've looked into it, right? But their sight has nothing to do with it. Whether you see or don't see doesn't help you understand the concept of radio waves, or, infrared or ultraviolet, anything beyond the scope of visible. So we're all on the same page when it comes to that. So I think it's possible for a blind person to come up with concepts of color, the same as we have come up with concepts of the spectrum of the electromagnetic, of radiation, right? So we can all learn things, and this is, if it's a conscious choice, and so you can consciously choose to be smarter. or you can consciously choose to be dumber. Now, dumber about what? Like you can be an expert in what you want to know about, or or you could choose to not learn about things. But just because you choose to not learn about metals doesn't mean you're dumb. You might be, way more intelligent when it comes to, I don't know, paper or whatever, guitar strings or, I don't know what, something, right? So you could choose, we all do this, we choose what we learn about, but some people choose to not really learn things, right? So it all depends on whether you have the desire to learn more things or not learn more things. But even despite that, we're still, doesn't matter what you learn, it does matter. So whatever you choose to learn about, that's your choice. But you, in terms of being manipulated, the things in these videos that I'm talking about are things that we should all have a basic understanding of. Now, I'm not going to go down the rabbit holes because a lot of this stuff, like in the social sciences, just turn to garbage the deeper you go, because it's just assumptions built on assumptions. But, to choose to learn things like, how our brains work, at least a little bit, and how people try to manipulate us. These are pretty powerful tools to learn to not be manipulated, especially in the modern age of information warfare that's going on in social media and in politics and everything else. It's all about, the hearts and minds, right? But it is. It's, not so much about, they don't care about the hearts and the minds of people they're blowing up, but they're really going after the hearts and the minds of people who vote, right? Unless the elections are rigged, which in case, like, who cares what people think? And if that's the case, they just want you to be dumb or manipulated enough to not revolt, But if you're a curious, impartial, open-minded person, your collection of schemata is probably going to be bigger than somebody who's not, right? A lot of people aren't curious. They just want to watch the game and drink beer, not that that's a bad thing. It's good to relax. It's part of like a meditation, a release, right? But if that's all they do, if they don't bother, reading about or learning things, then, they're going to be dumber. And, it's a disadvantage. Be free to be stupid as you want. But, generally the smarter people are the ones that get ahead, right? And, it should go without saying. So the point that I'm getting to here also is that, we should be looking to, take the responsibility to learn new things as much as we can. Things are interesting when you start learning about them, right? And especially if those things are challenge our beliefs. If something gets you, riled up a bit and you disagree with it, maybe we should read about it more. Why are you getting emotional about it, right? If it's somebody says something like the Earth is a cube, or the Earth is flat or whatever, right? Why would you get emotional if somebody's saying something that's challenging you? Just, fine, you believe that and you're an idiot, right? Or, there are things you read, so you read about it, you learn, the Earth is spherical, right? It's this diameter, it orbits at this rate. You learn these things, so you know these things, right? This is the stuff that we all know now as kids, but we didn't know this in the past. People would argue about it, for generations, people argued about the world being flat or not. Even though there were people who knew for sure from experiment that it was round, using shadows. But we have a responsibility to each other to try to be as smart as we can, to not be mindless fools led by manipulation. And so, challenging your beliefs, challenging dogma, challenging, questioning, concepts that people give you is critical for, a free society, So we have a responsibility to, not be willing participants in manipulation for the sake of our society. We have a responsibility to try not to have our beliefs dictated to us, by someone else with interests that aren't in ours, right? We have a responsibility to question all concepts and assertions, right? And to acknowledge that our experiences are not complete. And what I mean by experiences are not complete doesn't mean that we experience everything. It means that experiences we have aren't complete experiences of whatever that was. For you it is, but it's not a omniscient perspective of what happened. Other people can experience different. Other people have different perspectives to what you have. Now, it's not to say that there's different truths, my truth, your truth. There is one truth, something happened, but your perspective is limited. As mature, fully developed humans, we should be aware that our first impressions are most likely wrong and we don't know everything. And it's amazing how many people you come across don't know that or don't believe it. There's a lot of mentally inflexible people out there who just believe that their first assumptions, what they assume right away, their first judgments are infallible fact, the truth. I'm going to judge quickly about this, quick to judge, and what I guess is true, and it is the truth. It doesn't matter what you say. So we don't want to be those kind of people. Yeah. So knowing this model of schemata might help us. If you're thinking about new information, you could think, well, does it really matter? I understand it. I don't understand it, right? Those are the basic things. But then you could think, well, it's something that I partially understand. And that's the key part, the gray area there, right? It's something that I know a little bit about, and this person's talking about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to make assumptions. I'm not going to jump to conclusions. I'm going to learn about this. I'm going to read about it, or if maybe it's something that's not important enough, but I'm going to recognize that I don't know. Now, this guy's talking about something that I know a little bit about, and I need to recognize that I know just a little bit about it. I don't know it all, and I should really resist the urge to make assumptions and jump to conclusions about stuff that I don't know about. Sort of like this video. But, when we come across people or things that we don't know about, humans have a vulnerability to pigeonhole these people or these, in our minds, to pigeonhole these people or these concepts into, a framework that doesn't quite fit, but we jam it in there anyways, and we make assumptions, and we're like, yeah, that's what they are. That person, oh yeah, that's what they are. I see them. I'm going to decide within 15 milliseconds, what they are. That person, judging from their clothes and how they stand and how they're, whatever, that's the kind of person they are. Obviously, that's wrong. We're not super, super sensed people. What do you call that? Metaphysical crap. I don't know. I can't remember what it's called. But, we don't have these extrasensory perception skills to, read a person. We don't have a crystal ball, So we need to realize that, our first assumptions about people or concepts or things are going to be most likely wrong, right? And knowing this concept of schemata is not a bad thing, right? But also know it's a model, right? It might not be totally true. It might not be exactly how things work, but even just those concepts are pretty good ones, so they're going to help us. Yeah. So when we do that, not all our assumptions are wrong, but they're certainly not all right. So we use, our schemata to help us temporarily and approximately, fill the gaps. It's heuristics, right, of our knowledge, to make the best fit. And we need to realize that, there are assumptions, but we also have a vulnerability to, once we've made an assumption, we tend to, fight to sustain it. Not everybody, and not everybody to the same degree, but that is also a tendency that we might want to resist if we sense that we're like, hey, I made an assumption, I'm going to argue this. Well, no, you're not. Yeah, so if we're not careful, you don't want to be, ignoring evidence contrary to your assumptions, right? Because we have the vulnerability to want to defend our assumptions. And so you got to have the mental character, to admit you're wrong, admit you don't know. And that's the biggest thing. It's not hard. Well, I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. It's worse, to say you know when you don't know, or to believe you know when you don't know. And, but what can you do, right? We muddle through. We muddle through as best we can, right? There's things we know, and things we don't. So it's important to be careful to not ignore evidence contrary to our assumptions, to not ignore factual evidence. And as well as acknowledging that there are other people's experiences and their concepts that they know that may have brought them to the point where they can comprehend a concept that you and I can't. We don't yet have the powers to perceive this concept because we haven't gone down that rabbit hole as deep as that person has. So this is a vector of attack that there are limits to everybody's knowledge. How many people are experts on, lens caps? How many people are experts on, I don't know, anything, it could be, valves on, 1960s muscle cars, there are some people and a lot of people aren't, right? That's a dying breed. But point is, there are definitely going to be things that people don't know. And this is a vulnerability the manipulator will use. So this is a vector of attack that manipulators will use. They could use some esoteric concept that, nobody's an expert of, or very few people, or knowing that you're not is the critical point. And, they'll say, well, you obviously can't understand this because you're not an expert in this field. And when in fact, what they're trying to push is just bullshit, right? And unless you are an expert in the field, or you have an expert in your corner, or you take the time to learn about, which is, most of the time we can. If somebody else knows about it, then you can pretty much know about it, right? Just takes time, unless it's, some sense they have that you don't, which is, you have all your senses. What do they have you don't, right? Nothing. So you could take the time to learn about anything that anybody's talking about and find out if it's bullshit. But that's not the point. The manipulators right now know that you don't have the time to research what they're talking about, and you probably aren't an expert in the field, and you don't have an expert in your corner, so they're going to try to baffle you with bullshit about some esoteric thing that you don't know about. And now it's not about winning an argument, it's about manipulating you. It's about getting you to have to agree, or that you don't know, right? And then they're going to say, well, I do know, so therefore, you better get back in your hole, and we're gonna take it from here, kind of thing, right? So you got to be careful, and it may just be a thing. Even like con men, it's how they work is that they don't need you to never find out. They just need you to not know for their purposes, which may just be a matter of 30 seconds or 10 minutes or whatever. Long as you don't know for that period of time, they've succeeded, right? Like most encryption you can crack just if you have enough time. Right, if you have enough computer power. But that's not the point. The point is, if you have something that's encrypted, you need it encrypted for a period of time that's useful. And if it's that period, 50 years, 100 years, I don't know, depending on the computers that are coming, right? That's all you need. So everything can be cracked eventually, and so that's how manipulators and con men will work, right? So that's something that we have to watch out for. If somebody's trying to baffle you with bullshit. But just because it's a new concept that somebody's giving you doesn't mean they're manipulators, and doesn't mean it's not true, right? Somebody might actually be giving you real information that's true, right? But so you have to try to look at the sources, and we're vulnerable to have our schemata tweaked, right? By depending on how long of a grift it is, if they're giving you a concept that is not true and you don't know that, but you believe it. And then you can say, okay, well, I see that concept. It makes sense, but it may not be true, but it makes sense. So now you have that concept, and they're going to use that to try to steer your perception of things in the future, right? By making assumptions and all these other tricks, right? So there could be people, again, it's two ways. People could be honestly just misinforming you, or being misinformed and then informing you about these concepts that they heard about, or might be intentional disinformation, right? So it's these are all nuances to lying, right? But not really. So going back to schema here, some schema are shared in a culture. These could be an erroneous assumption, culture-wide, or individual-wide, right? So, it could be factions, cults, ideologues in academia, any of the religions, right? Anybody who believes with certainty, a closed-minded person, that they're right and will not even entertain the idea that they're wrong, that fits in well with these groups, right? And as with most things, it's two-sided. Just because you make an assumption doesn't mean you're wrong. And another group of people that obviously are advertisers. They'll try to tinker with your schema by giving you new concepts about a new definition of a social norm, right? Like they'll use overlapping or techniques to try to get you to do what they want you to do, but some of these programs are pretty horrible. Like it wasn't too long ago that Gillette came up with this egregious anti-man campaign, which had nothing to do with selling razors, and everything to do with virtue signaling. They're being closed-minded woke bigots. Now, I don't know if they were doing this because they think women would approve of that, and women are the ones who buy razors for their men. I don't know, but it was, I'm sure, a major flop. But if a politician or a journalist or a teacher or anyone else, is allowed to tinker with your schemata, just think of the risk. You're being deceived, but you're being deceived to the core of your perception of how you perceive things. That's pretty spooky. And it's not that hard for someone to do. All they have to do is lead you down a path where, you make false assumptions, the assumptions that they want us to make, and it's just signposts they can put along the route. So it's easy for them to manipulate us. So that's something to watch out for. Fucking retard. So that's something for us to watch out for. So experts in this field have categorized schemata into the following groups. There's a personal or social schemata, which is general social knowledge. Personal schemata, which is about the individual. The idealized person schemata, like archetypes. But archetypes aren't really idealized. It's just, I guess, social schemata or self schemata about oneself. What's the difference between that and personal schemata? Maybe projected selves or possible selves. Role schemata. Enough of this bullshit. So they make these categories about the different types of schemata, trait, and object, and event, which doesn't really fit, I think, the definition of schemata, which is, your mental framework. So, you might, a way of behaving. I think there's subcategories, which I think is beyond the definition of schemas. If you're in a different situation, if you're in a different environment, you act a certain way because of how your mental conditioning, your schemata. Well, I don't think that's true. I think, you're behaving that way, but I don't think it's because you don't have the concepts to behave any other way, right? If you behave a certain way around your buddies drinking pizza, you behave a different way at some formal event, it's not because you're not capable of behaving either way in the other event, right? So that's not how you're like. That's a wrong definition, and you're gonna see that if you look into this, this whole event schemata. I think people are just trying to come up with, again, the social science is such a they're confused. Another thing is, often, this is sort of a side note, is often prototype and archetype are confused in the social sciences. The prototype is an object, a physical thing to test ideas. So you come up with an electronic circuit, you're like, hey, I want to make this flashing light circuit. So you make a prototype, an object, right? And you make it. Does it work? Does it not work? You can tweak it, right? Then maybe you're going to make a production model, but you're going to make a prototype, which is a physical thing to test your ideas. You can make a prototype car, a prototype motorbike, right? These are things to test your ideas, right? It's a physical thing, whereas an archetype is an abstract idea, about what something is. It's like when you picture a chair. Is it a chair? It's a chair. It's not a perfect chair. It's not an idealized chair. It's just a chair, I guess technically it's an idealized, but it's not like the perfect chair. It's a chair. And, there's a lot of room in your archetype to encompass all different kinds of chairs, right? So there isn't one perfect chair. There's a bunch of different types of chairs. So another vulnerability to your schemata is associations. How you think. So a manipulator will manipulate or will try to manipulate you by associating something like nationalism with bad, and so you won't consider if nationalism is good or bad. You'll just make the leap that nationalism is bad without conscious thought. And, unless you're, of course, if you're a 1% globalist, who wants cheap slave labor, with no environmental oversight, you would agree that nationalism is bad. And you might argue for globalism so you can make money off the backs of the poor children in some other land to make your running shoes or your, whatever, your cell phones in their sweatshops, right? You want to bring prosperity and pollute their waters, right? So what are these tribal people doing living in the Amazon, right? They need our prosperity. They should be in our factories for 50 cents an hour, making our cell phones and our shoes, and borrowing from our banks, right? So that's the globalist view of things, right? So I'm going to make a video, I think, about nationalism versus globalism. And that's the thing that in some courses, I think it was a psych course, they're talking about globalism and the same thing. They were doing that, and I noticed they were talking about, like, what the hell does this got to do with anything? But he was talking about globalism as an assertion that there is no question. You can't even question. It was just, it's true. Globalism is better. How is that better? Is it better for the tribal people living in the jungles to be dragged out of their tribes and have their forests burned down for factories to make, cheap running shoes? Yeah, according to these people, it is better. So I guess it's subjective. I don't think it's better, and I don't think those other people, the people in the jungles, think it's better, and I don't think most humans think it's better. Only some of the scumbags who are profiting from this are the ones who think it's better, and the ones in academia. Oddly enough, I think they're getting paid by some of these corporate lobbyists or fundraiser type. I don't want to make too many speculations, but I know China gave $2 billion to Harvard University. That's a lot of influence. So schemata, affects how you perceive and how you remember things. If you're shown a video of a nurse drinking and you think nurses are alcoholics, you might remember that video later on of a nurse drinking a glass of wine, even though she was drinking a bottle of water, right? So your perception and your memories are very fallible, but your perception is also distorted based on how you're perceived, your schemata, your stereotypes. If you do have stereotypes about nurses being alcoholics, which I don't think everybody does, but some people might, right? So, whereas people in the social sciences would say, we all have the same stereotype. We all think nurses are alcoholics, and all Chinese people eat with chopsticks, right? That's what they think. They think that everybody thinks that all Chinese people, not Chinese, all Asians, right? It's the same as thinking about police. Obviously some people think that, all police are scummy dirtbags, and other people think all police are, honest, heroes. And the reality, that I think, and I think most other people is somewhere in the middle, is that, there are scumbag, dirtbag, douchebag cops, and there are some honest ones that actually earn their money and aren't scumbag, dishonest, taking money, breaking the law, shitheads. So you need to think, if you are feeling extreme about certain things, maybe you should look into it. Maybe all cops, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe all cops are all dirtbags. Right? Maybe they are. Maybe they're all good guys. Well, I know they're not, because I've seen some that aren't. So I know definitely, absolutely, that they're not all good guys. Right? But there's how many interactions with, I don't want to side, enough of the cops. So assimilation, this is what we were talking about earlier. So assimilation is making new information fit in with your existing understanding of the world. If new information is close to what we already understand, we'll assimilate that information. Accommodation is when the information is alien, but we are still able to rewire our minds to understand and gain the required concepts for our minds to accommodate the idea. So we may experience things, may need to experience things in order to understand them, depending on, I guess, how you learn. I guess I'll talk about it a bit. There was this guy in the UK who did an experiment with students, and he gave them the story, and the story had, intentionally alien concepts that he knew the kids wouldn't really understand. Then he asked them to recall the story later on in the future, and the kids would, right away they were close, and then, a few weeks later they were further away, and a few weeks later the stories were getting worse and worse and worse because these concepts didn't grasp. So, and the kids would remember the stories wrong because they didn't really understand it at first, right? So the point here is that, using the model of schema, that, memories are controlled by, your perceptions or what you're able to perceive in the world. So manipulators can, alter our memories. There's another experiment that I don't know where they implanted fake memories in students, about them being arrested when they were young, and you do it bit by bit. And it's interesting to see, how it worked. And you can implant fake memories in people if you do it subtle and over time. So you can implant memories in people, and people can also, for no other reason other than not really fully understanding what they heard, misremember things. So misremembering and then the implanting of fake memories, I mean, you could be manipulated, right? There's some vulnerability there, right? To our minds, there's some chinks in our armor there. So these are things we need to watch out for. Take notes, I guess, would be a good thing. Write a diary, and keep notes so you can recall. Because a lot of times people, for no reason, just you start misremembering things. And when you look back in your own notes, you're like, holy shit, that's how that happened? In your own handwriting, right? So you can, so important things especially, date them, write them down, write ideas, write things. Diaries are a good way to protect yourself from being manipulated in terms of altering your memory. Photographs obviously are good things, but social media maybe not so. So another defense is to be self-aware. Question as many of your assumptions, or as everybody's assumptions. Question as many assumptions as there are, as you can, right? Seek evidence to, confirm or refute your own assumptions. Do it on your own time, independently, and always searching for new concepts. And if anybody's rushing you or trying to jam you, there's not much you can really do about it. I mean, depending on the situation, somebody's dressed up as a cop and they're, saying you got to do this, and you don't really have time to think about, well, what are they talking about? Sometimes you just kind of have to. So we are vulnerable to manipulation by con artists, for sure. Sometimes there's just not much you can do about it if you don't have time, and that's part of the, a lot of these ploys is to not give you time. And that's what a lot of the media does when they try to drum up, divisive hate, is they'll pump a story and they know they don't have the facts, or maybe they know the facts and they're not giving us all the facts, to try to bait people into being emotional about something, right? And the reporters know full well, because if I'm reading it and I know they don't have the facts, and yet they're framing it a certain way, and they'll assert things. This person was motivated by hate. Who, based on what? What do you? And they can get away with it. They do it all the time. They make these assumptions or assertions, based on assumptions. I don't think they don't know. I don't think they care what the person's motivation was. If they say this person did this because of hate or because of something, you know what I mean? There's an injustice here, then people are going to get upset. People are going to read. People are going to click. People are going to, add revenue for the scummy journalists of the world out there that are pushing this crap, dividing society for fucking money, pieces of shit, Anyways, you see it all the time. So whenever you see headlines and they say, oh, this person was motivated by this, based on what? What are you basing that motivation on? Did you read their fucking mind? I don't think so. But it's a, challenging assumptions are a very good thing, and it's a very bad thing when manipulators trick you into changing your assumptions to, if you are right. Not all assumptions are wrong, right? So they might trick you, into changing your assumptions to something they want you to, think, for their own reasons. But in fact, you're just being duped into changing your schema into something someone else wanted for their reasons, right? So we should be very wary of politicians, compromised academics, corrupted scientists, and of course, scummy fucking journalists. But anyone you meet in any walk of life could be a closed-minded, scummy manipulator. Maybe they're not closed-minded. Maybe they're open-minded, but maybe they're still a scummy manipulator, right? I don't know what's going on in the minds of these fucking dirtbag journalists. So, but it appears to be that they're, I don't know if they're consumed by hate. They want to promote hate. I would think that they're just doing it for money. Maybe they do it for so long that they start making themselves believe their own hype. I don't know, but that's enough for this episode, I think. Episode 9 coming up. Until then.